Hey Stillwater, welcome to the Still Connect podcast, a podcast all about Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm your host, Denver Evans, a born and raised Stillwater local and owner of Stillwater Digital Marketing. Every Wednesday, I share a friendly chat with someone in our community that's helping make Stillwater such a great place. Whether you're a longtime resident or just a visitor, this is your place to plug in, stay inspired, and still connect with the stories that shape our community. If you ever want to watch these interviews, you can also check them out on YouTube. In this episode, I got to sit down with Cory Williams with Hatch, Look Properties, Upside Hospitality, and much more, as you're about to find out. Let's jump in. Cory, could you give us just kind of an overview of everything you kind of dipping your fingers in?
Yeah, let's see, a little bit of everything. So I'm an attorney by trade. I tell people I'm a recovering politician. We go to meetings, we make amends, the whole 9 yards. And then kind of my passion project is downtown Stillwater and kind of historic redevelopment and trying to make it sustainable for the next generation. And so in order to do that, we've been trying to increase residential density. We've been trying to take some of these buildings that aren't the easiest to rehab and get them back into service as something viable in a manner that can attract some operators that maybe otherwise would not take the risk on something like that. And so, yeah, we've done a few of these things. You know, we've done District 1 and District 2 and Stone Cloud and Empire and Hatch and Roundhouse and Refaced, Elite Repeat, Once Upon a Time. And so, yeah, it's been fun. Those are the main things. You know, we have a property management and a real estate company, and so our name gets seen a lot in that respect. But my side hustle is kind of my main hustle, and it's the one I like the most.
Yeah, very cool. So tell me about some of these projects. What have they been like? Maybe we can start with Hatch.
Yeah, so I kind of traditionally try to find something that's a hole in the marketplace for Stillwater, where we are missing something that I think our citizens would like to have. And selfishly, it's probably just things that I like to have. But I don't think I'm so special that 20,000 other people wouldn't also like it, kind of thing. And so that was born out of about a 5-year conversation. You know, I was down at the Capitol from 08 to 18. And during that time, Hatch and on Broadway, 10th and Broadway is not that far away from the Capitol. So it took a lot of morning meetings there and then took a lot of lunches there, just trying to escape the hustle and bustle of the Capitol, and really fell in love with it. Met the owners and brought them into Stillwater multiple times between really 15, 16, and 19, trying to get them to come to downtown and open a Hatch and be a corporate-owned facility. And it just really wasn't ever able to get them. Most operators look at Stillwater a little bit as a 9 or 10-month market. They look at us for what we are on paper, and Stillwater does not show particularly well on paper. We have one of the lowest household incomes in the state, even though that's not a true reflection of what we actually have here or who we actually are. But we've got about 20,000 students that don't necessarily show up on our income statement, even though they're driving around in Range Rovers and hopped up Jeeps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so when I go talk to an operator, everything I say gets run through that he's a developer with square footage to fill filter. And so they like me and they hear me, but they're also extremely cautious. And so they're going to go to the census data, they're going to go to the chamber data, they're going to go look at it and drill in and go, yeah, this is not where we want to be, especially whenever they could go to an Owasso, a Yukon, an El Reno, a Bixby, where they know they have the population base and they know they're going to have the volume and the traffic. And
they don't even have to ask those questions.
Right. They don't have to at all. It's obvious on its face. And so after they had turned me down multiple times, I said, okay, well, I guess you're just going to have to sell me a license. And Jeff looks at me, he's like, you really mean that? And I go, yeah, why not? I mean, my life has been a series of building the plane as you fall out of the sky. So, we'll figure it out. And so that conversation kind of went on for 18 months, 2 years. And finally it was like, okay, let's do this. And, with every project, there's so much in the background and then and it moves super slow and tedious. And then all of a sudden it's a dead sprint. And so in 20, I bought in 20 and very early part of 21, I probably bought 4 or 5 buildings, all basically abandoned, all basically dilapidated and in serious need of repair. all south of 9th Street. And I just needed to start filling them. And so that's how we got Stone Cloud. That's how we got Hatch, and then Roundhouse, or Roundhouse, then Hatch, actually, is the order of operations. And then Empire. And so I became a reluctant owner-operator of Hatch, basically because I have to bet on Stillwater, and I have to kind of put my money where my mouth is. Like, I really do believe in this, and I really do think we can have and sustain nice things as long as they are done correctly. And so I think sometimes in Stillwater, we get operators that have a tendency to miss the details and don't really know why something doesn't work the way it should, but it's the details that matter. And it's the details that you don't even know why you want to go somewhere, but you want to be there. And there's a detail somewhere in that mix that is creating an emotional connection for you, or creating something that your being says, this is a place I want to be. This is a place I'm comfortable. And, I think Matt and Joel did a fantastic job of that at Stone Cloud. I don't think you really know why you want to be at Stone Cloud. You may not even be a beer drinker, but you feel good in a place like that. And so I kind of wanted to give Stillwater a different option than what we had. And so people will say like, well, yeah, we already have breakfast. And that's a very fair point. We do. Again, there are different holes that I think we have in our market where, yes, it's the same industry. It's the same market segment, but it's different. Like Jimmy's Egg and Hatch, very different experiences.
Oh, right.
Both filling a very good niche and a very good need. Same with Crannies, same with just waffling. But they're all very, very different. And there, in my opinion, is room for it. And I kind of felt the same way with Stone Cloud. Like, yes, there's Iron Monk and they're doing a fantastic job, but there's room in our market for different things that appeal to different people. We have that kind of a population, and we need to do a better job, in my opinion, of trying to hit those things.
So how do we do a better job?
I don't know, but I'm ready for other people to join me. It's a slower process for me, but we're actually, I think, starting to kind of turn that corner and making more and more people aware that Stillwater is a very viable market, and that there are resources here, and we have expendable income, and we are willing to pay, and we can sustain you. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know it, but that Texas Roadhouse that's out, that's a $5.5 million restaurant. That's their gross revenue in a year. That's a pretty healthy number anywhere, especially in a college community of 50,000. And so I think we need to do a little bit better job of telling our story. And I've talked with Elaine at the chamber, and I've talked with President Schrum at the university, and Christy at Visit Stillwater. We've got to do a better job of getting our version of our numbers out to operators. I have to, how many students are at OSU that their parents aren't even filling out a FAFSA, which means that they have a gross income of $150,000 or more. Well, there's a huge section of them. Like, okay, from that, what are their parents spending here? And we need to somehow get that into our income statement so that we can adjust it, because the census is not the end-all, be-all information about Stillwater, Oklahoma. Right. And then for the people that are here and the people that want to be entrepreneurs and that want to do things, I wish I could host a seminar on the details matter. And I've had that conversation in front of the city before. We took TIF assistance on Stone Cloud, and we took TIF assistance on Hatch. We do those things in order to help suppress rents so that these operators from other markets can see like, oh yeah, you can make it here. It's kind of the government as a loss leader or something along those lines. But whenever I've been in front of the city council or the planning commission, I always talk about, hey, we can do it differently, and I can do it for less. But that's going to pull the details out of this project. And you won't know why you don't like it, but you'll like it much differently than if we were able to hit all of these points. And then you'll love it, and it'll be great. And 20 years from now, the goal is somebody can look back and go, oh man, they did it right. Like, they got it. And so that's it. We're just trying to give people a little bit of an elevated experience. I'm really tired of hearing how cool Manhattan is. I'm really tired of hearing how cool Lawrence is, or even Norman. People forget Norman has about 300,000 people that they have immediate access to, so it's different. But there's no reason that Stillwater, Oklahoma cannot be on the list of top 5 college towns. Like, just kick-ass Midwest college towns that if you want arts, we've got it. You want athletics? We've got it. You want culinary? We've got it. And we're here to showcase all of it.
So do you think those communities really kind of have a good grasp of the details matter?
Yeah, I think that they do. I think that they've probably been a little bit more progressive, if you will, in their approach from time to time. And I think Stillwater's getting there. I tell people, a decade ago, maybe a little bit more than that, but a decade ago, if I wanted to go to the city of Stillwater about something that hadn't been done before, it felt like you always started at a no, and you really had to work hard to get to a maybe, and it had to work exceptionally hard to get to a yes. And I do feel that there's been a change at City Hall, and that there's been a change kind of in the community overall, to where I feel like we started a maybe now, and we work our way into a yes, which is great because there's a lot more you can do and a lot more creatively you can think if you at least start at a maybe. Like, okay, well, maybe means we can figure it out. No is like, we're shutting the door and it's going to be really hard. And so I'm glad that we're there, and I think that some of these other communities just got there a lot earlier than we did. Mm-hmm. Some of their town founders or fathers or leaders, civic leaders, were like willing to take risks that I don't think Stillwater was willing to take at the time that we should have been taking them.
So when you say risks, like what does that look like from a city municipality perspective? Like what is a risk?
Well, like we were one of the last communities of our size in Oklahoma to attempt a sales tax TIF at all. And, TIF is a relatively I don't want to say uniform. It's a widely accepted tool for municipal finance. And, the Devon Tower, I think, is built in 3 separate TIFs. That's how it's structured. And that's sometimes one of the ways that a complex capital stack gets put together. We didn't have. Could
you define capital stack for people who?
Yeah, capital stack is the money that you put together to pull off a project. And, sometimes in Stillwater, you've got your conventional finance, which is coming in from a bank.
What's a TIF?
Okay. Yeah. A TIF it's called, the technical name is tax increment finance. And basically it is a geographic area that the city and the voters draw up, and development in that area has access to either infrastructure funding or economic development funding or something. Basically, the ad valorem taxes get frozen the day that the voters pass the TIF. So whatever you were paying in 2017, that's your basis. And then as development happens in that geographic area, the ad valorem assessments are going to go up. Well, that difference between what they are today and what they were in 2017, that gets captured and swept over to a separate account. And it's used to provide economic development incentives. It's used to redo infrastructure in an area and things like that in order to help what is supposed to be a blighted and not abandoned, but, downtrodden area redevelop and increase the tax base and increase the quality of life.
Yeah. So Stillwater had like some downtown TIF opportunities, correct?
Yeah. So, we had sales tax TIFs, but we never had an ad valorem TIF.
So what's an ad valorem TIF?
Ad valorem is your property tax.
Okay.
It's called an ad valorem tax. Added value is, I think, the Latin translation. But like Academy was a sales tax TIF out there. And so that developer got a percentage of the sales tax that the project generated back as economic development assistance to help offset the cost of their infrastructure and offset the cost of the overall development. And communities look at different things and say, but for doing this TIF, we wouldn't be able to have this business, and thereby we wouldn't have the taxes or the jobs or the quality of life generated from that business. That's kind of the working theory behind it. Stillwater was one of the last ones to do an ad valorem TIF because you have to have permission of the entities that share in the property tax. So you got to have the city, you got to have the county, you got to have the school, you got to have the VOTEC all on board. And we weren't even willing to have that conversation. And it was kind of a weird deal. Then Counselor, now Mayor Joyce, and I were talking about a project I wanted to do at 4th and Ramsey back in the day. And we had this beautiful piece of land, and I wanted to do this very Austin, Dallas development that would be probably more student-centric, but certainly adults would be welcome kind of thing. But just kind of placement-wise, it'd be more student-centric. And in this particular area, they passed this zoning, and it required the developer to do a whole lot of the public realm improvements, streets, sidewalks, streetscapes, the whole 9 yards. My overall redevelopment was about 500,000. My portion of city improvements was about 375,000. And I was like, this model doesn't work.
Yeah.
And mayor was like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't, but we need these things. How are we going to pay for them? And I said, well, if you want only these big box developments coming in, the model you have right now works fine, because that's a $30 million project sitting across the street. Giving them $500,000 or $1 million of public realm improvements, it's not even a rounding error in the overall project. They're fine with it. But if you're looking for mom and pop or locally owned or smaller boutique things, like, we can't do that. And we're going to have to figure out a different way to cost share in a situation like this. And that's kind of what started the conversation about a TIF. It ended up differently than I visualized it, but I think it's been executed pretty well. And for the most part, I think people would say it's been successful, but a lot of other municipalities got their way ahead of us for whatever reason. And so I think it gets back to that. We always need to be in a mindset of maybe. I'd love to get us to a yes, but at least we need to operate with a maybe. And I think for decades, we operated at a no, and you'll have to beat me into a maybe or a yes. And I think, that's okay. I know the past is the past, and we've got a lot of opportunity ahead of us because of that. Because honestly, I think we're behind, which provides opportunity. I think we need certain things, and we can have those now, and move forward and be successful.
That's great. So the TIFs that you were involved with and used, what exactly were they? Okay,
so I think it actually was in 17. Somebody else can give me a real number, but I think it was 17, maybe 18. The city did go ahead and pass a TIF that encompassed all of downtown and a corridor connecting to OSU, where they identified these areas are in blight and they are in desperate need of economic development or redevelopment, as the case may be. And so they passed that geographic map. They got everybody to sign off on it. And in that area, you are able to apply for assistance based on the tax that you're going to generate, both ad valorem and sales tax, and the overall cost of the project. And it's usually a kind of a floating percentage. And there's a group of volunteers that run the TIF review committee, and they look at it and they kind of give a thumbs up or thumbs down or suggestions to City Council and the Economic Development Authority of Stillwater. And then those bodies give it a final approval or a vote down or whatever. And so, Stone Cloud, that was about an $875,000 project. And Joel pays rent on about a $500,000 project. But I knew that breweries are one of the best ways to redevelop a blighted area. They create an amazing sense of community and a ton of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicular. And it can really be the anchor that you need to help, for lack of a better term, gentrify an area. And so I was fine having them as kind of my loss leader. And I used the city's economic development assistance as an offset to help subsidize their rent so that we could have an Oklahoma City operator. Joel's a local guy, and he's from Stillwater, but his operation really is in Oklahoma City. That's where the commercial production facility is. That's where his first tap room is. And so to attract an Oklahoma City operator here that would otherwise be very wary, but they look at it and go like, okay, so you're telling me I can have this $750,000 asset for $500,000 and try this out? It's kind of a no-lose situation for them. And so that was the first one that we did. And, I don't know if you remember what 10th and Main looked like just a few years ago, but the building where Hatch is, which might be the brightest, most vibrant building in downtown, that building had no windows. And I mean, none. I tried to bring Hal Smith that owns Louis, the Garage, Mahogany, and a bunch of Charleston's. Mm-hmm. We hosted them a couple of different times, Hal Smith and two of his senior execs. And we walked through that building when Uncle Mike's was in it. And I'd already bought it, but it was still occupied by Uncle Mike and everything. And Hal Smith just told me point blank, he's like, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't see it. And then his guy was here, I don't know, 5 months ago or so eating because he's got a kid at school here. And he's like, hey, man, none of us saw it. And this looks exceptionally good. But it's, it took a building that was not assessed for very much at all on the tax rolls, that was barely generating any sales tax, if any at all. And now it's got, 80 employees in there, a huge, it's larger than I would like, but a very healthy property tax bill, generates a ton of alcohol and sales tax for the community. And we've had 4 businesses open up in the very immediate vicinity of Hatch since we opened. And so I could very easily make the argument that the economic development and the TIF worked exactly as they are designed to work, because but for being able to reach into that pool of money and be supported, it would not have been an economically viable project.
That makes sense. That's really great. So how did you build these relationships with like the owners of Hatch, Oklahoma owned company, Stone Cloud, Oklahoma owned, Empire, Oklahoma owned, right?
Yeah. Persistence. I mean,
how did you even find them? Like I know Hatch, you said you went in there a lot and met the owners, but
so, I mean, Joel is here probably in large part because of politics. Back in the day, breweries, whenever they were making their beer, they had to make a 3-2 beer as well. And that was really the only thing that they could sell from the tap. And the rest of their product had to be, you could buy it from a club, or, and I'm using air quotes for those who can't see us, but, or they would have to sell their product to a distributor who would have to sell it back to them, and then they could sell it to the consumer. And so Joel actually worked with me on a taproom law and a change to those things. And we were able to get the, I just remember just Free the Taps Day, and I think that was like 14, 15, somewhere in there. It was before the large alcohol reform bill that we passed and that the voters voted on. This was a measure that we passed in the House and the Senate, and the governor signed. Through that, worked with Joel quite a bit. And then Joel's a biker and a hiker and into nature. And so he had a really close relationship with Bobby and Crystal from District Bicycles. And Bobby's my neighbor professionally and personally. And so we spent a lot of time together, and we were sitting there talking one day and like, hey, we need to get something down on this south side. What can we get? Well, I heard Joel was looking at doing something. That's really all I need to hear. Somebody plants a seed like that, I'm like, if it's something that interests me, I'm going to chase it down. And so got a hold of Joel, and I bet you I showed him a half dozen buildings, and not one of them did I feel like he was even remotely lukewarm to. And then he walked in this one, and again, I would tell you, I don't think he was remotely lukewarm to it, but it was the least offensive building that he had seen.
The least offensive.
Yeah. And if you had seen what it looked like, that sentence makes a lot of sense. When I was in front of city council on it, they kept asking me like, so where's this building at again? And finally, I just told them, I said, listen, you've driven by it 100 times and you've never seen it once. But when we get done, you'll never be able to drive by without seeing it again.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty true. And I think Joel and Matt have done a fantastic job of it. But, Rachel, and there's a guy from Stillwater named John Dotson, and graduated a few years younger than me, so a few years after me. And he's a big developer in Oklahoma City and does some really great socially conscious development projects. And he's got good relationships with a lot of restaurant operators and whatnot. And he called one day and he's like, hey, Joel and I know this woman named Rachel, and she's got Empire and she's got this and that. And like, I think you need to meet her. And so that happened probably 4 years before we actually brought Empire in. And then it's just a matter of like, life is pretty small, and you just end up bumping into the same people in the same circles and saying hi and like, hey, and so-and-so heard about this project that you're doing, and I heard you're doing this, and like, hey, we're thinking about trying to expand and do something. Like, hey, that's cool. That's all I need to hear. If somebody has an open mind about, hey, we're looking at, okay, I can sell you the rest of it and I can help you get it done because I believe in Stillwater and I believe in what you're trying to do, and it's great. And so they're just prolonged conversations, and they really are. Every single one of these things has been a really long, prolonged conversation. Even the hotel, we're talking about doing, like, that's been a slow burn. People primarily see all the hammer swinging and then the opening, and they think, wow, that was quick. Like, there's nothing quick about it.
So to everyone who just went, the hotel.
Yeah. In my vernacular, it seems normal, and I'm actually doing that very intentionally because I'm trying to normalize it in my head. But in 2020, in February 14th of 2020. It was my Valentine's Day gift to myself. I bought the Albatross on South Main, 907 South Main, which some people refer to as a McCollum's building because they had it for so long. Some people refer to it as a VFW building because it had a VFW sign on it for decades. And some people refer to it as a Masonic building because it's got a big Masonic seal at the top. So it's all those things to me. I call it the Lytton building because that was the original builder of it. But I bought that building February 14th of 2020. About a month later, the world crashed and closed down. And I thought, your timing might be suspect. I'm like, I could have probably done that a little bit better. But I hired somebody for a job I did not even know existed, an architectural historian. And she helped us get the building registered with the National Park Service and the Department of Interior as a historic place, so that we will be able to access historic preservation tax credits, which goes back to that capital stack conversation we were having earlier. Like, HP tax credits allow you to get about 40% of your overall development costs back in tax credits, both state and federal. And you use that to really help put together the money it's going to take to pull this project off. And so we have the initial schematic design done, 41 rooms, rooftop bar and event space, full service restaurant downstairs. And it's going to be really, really cool. And I say it's going to be because I'm going to will this thing into existence and we will get it done. And I think downtown as a whole will be remarkably different because of it. And I think that the south end of downtown that has been kind of downtown stepchild for a very long time is actually going to be a bustling place full of vibrancy and pedestrian traffic and busyness.
Yeah. It felt like downtown stopped at about 9th Street.
I think that's being generous. I'll be honest. I felt like the pedestrian version of downtown stopped at 8th.
Yeah. I guess it makes sense. I don't know, like Boomerang, Balanced Coffee, Typo Market, those definitely help.
You think about how long those have been there, though. Like,
oh, yeah.
Balance is
2018. They're both, I think, 2018. I actually interviewed Susan Hartford, who owns Typo.
Yeah. And so before then, really think about what was there. I mean, it was really quiet once you got to Bank First, basically.
Yeah. It was like, what's this? There's a fountain down here.
Right. And it's so crazy. And now the funny thing is, I have shown some developers very recently some buildings that we've got in downtown. And twice now I have heard when I was trying to show a building on 8th Street, it's nice, but we want to be where the action's at. And so we want to be down here by this Empire Stone Cloud thing and Hatch. And I just, exactly what you're doing. I just laugh because that is an unfathomable comment 3 years ago.
Right.
The city council literally asked me, where is this again? And now people are telling me, well, that's nice, but we really want to be down here where the action.
You don't want to be 2 blocks away from that.
Yeah, and you're just like that.
And usually people before probably would have said, I want to be at least 2 blocks away from that area.
100%.
Because there's nothing there.
Yeah, and so, which is good because it's helped me to be mindful about what's happening up here at 7th.
Yeah.
We did a whole lot of work on the 7th and Main corridor back in the day, and I need to be mindful. Like, hey, I never want to do anything in town that takes away from something else. Right. The goal is, yes, there's going to be competition, absolutely, but my goal is always to enhance and not to do something here that is to the detriment of something over here.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I've been so kind of outspoken about, hey, let's not develop too many commercial clusters because we are just a town of 50,000. We can only sustain so much, and so like we should be thoughtful and kind of proactive in how we're laying out the community and where we want things and make them to where they're sustainable so we're not constantly churning through entrepreneurs or operators because every time one goes down, 5 other people look at it who were thinking about doing something and they're like, no, I'm not doing that. Right. No way. And they don't know the background about the why something failed. All they see is that it didn't work. And they're like, well, I can't do that. I'm out. Yeah. And so I'm like, I really do believe the community as a whole, we need to be thoughtful. We can't do another huge commercial park until we get another 15, 20,000 people here. And then, okay, that's cool. But so it's fun. I've enjoyed the area, but I do try to be mindful that nothing we're doing is going to hurt somebody else.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think they'll connect eventually, right?
Oh, yeah.
And become just like, I mean, there's really not that much of a separation currently. It's a couple blocks, but once we get some parking, that'll be nice.
Yeah, no. And you know, I think there's going to be some things happen in the immediate future where you're going to see a couple of bigger retailers open up on 8th that will help, you know, lessen that pedestrian desert, if you will, or whatever.
Is this like, this is going to happen, or like there are some retailers who are currently planning on moving in there, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to say because
not who. I didn't know if that
deal
was
hasn't gone through, but I know of at least one very recognizable brand that is moving and will locate on 8th. And
great.
That will help with the exposure of 8th Street a little bit and tie it a little bit closer to that 10th corridor. And I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to get some more residential development in the immediate vicinity. We're looking at doing about 13 single family homes kind of in a cottage court area.
Cool.
And the goal being that people can live, work, walk everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, like if you want to remote work, or if you want to, and then go get a beer or go get a coffee or go get lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever it might be, you can go see your entertainment. You can do all of that in downtown Stillwater.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So is all of this part of Upside? And can you tell just a little bit about like what is Upside?
So one day I used to have a partner in my office that was just kind of an office share situation. And he had a couple LLCs and I was an attorney. And then I had a couple other LLCs that held property or did different things. So I was an attorney, and then I was property manager, and then I had a couple other things. And so I had them all on the window. And my buddy showed up one day and he goes, "Man, you are the NASCAR of professionals, aren't you?" I was like, "What?" And he goes, "And there's like 8 different sponsorships on your front window." I was like, "Oh yeah. I need to focus a little bit more." So we've consolidated most of it. And so I have Look Properties, which is my real estate and brokerage and management. And then Progressive Development does the purchase of these large parcels and the redevelopment of them. And then this last year, whenever we decided that we were going to be an operator for Hatch, we opened up Upside Hospitality, which is the kind of the parent company that holds Hatch for now, and will hold this hotel, and probably will hold a couple of other hospitality assets before it's all over. That just in an effort to kind of redevelop and make Stillwater better, and again provide an elevated hospitality experience for everybody here. And so our stuff is focused on value, but also at an elevated experience for a reasonable price, kind of thing. You know, like I understand that Stillwater is probably not, we're not ready for $200 plate dinners, but we are ready for a $100 plate dinner that's done really, really well. You know, I tell people all the time, like I've gone and had a $100 dinner and thought that was pretty good. It was great, and pretty happy to pay it. And I've had a $30 dinner that I've been really mad at because nothing was done correctly, and the attention to detail was absolutely. And you just go, man. And I've had those experience flip flops. I've had a $30 dinner that I would have paid $200 for because everything was perfect and just well done. Yeah. And I've had a $100 dinner that was, it might as well have been a drive-through for all it was.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think about all the negativity of people complaining about local businesses on social media and things like that?
You know, I get it. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I don't know that social media has done us that many favors whenever it comes to really communicating. And it's funny because it gave everybody a voice box, but maybe not in the healthiest of manners or a constructive manner. And so, but I also think sometimes our operators don't do a good job of hitting the basics. I think, I listened to a podcast called How I Built This with Guy Raz. He's an NPR guy, and it's about entrepreneurs and founders of movements and organizations, and kind of how they got started and how they end up where they are. One of them was about the guy who started Xerox, or not Xerox, Kinko's. Sorry, same demographic, different. But he started Kinko's, and Kinko's originally was not open all night. But a guy down the block from him had a convenience store, and he was talking to that guy one day, and guy was a 24-hour convenience store, and he only did a couple $100 in the wee hours of the night overnight. So he decided to shut down because he's like, it's not really worth being open. And what he saw was, because he shut down for those hours, he saw a 20% reduction in his overall business. And the guy from Kinko's goes, all I heard was, if I'm open 24 hours, I'm going to get a 20% bump in my business.
Yeah.
And he goes, and you know what? I did. And he goes, we didn't do the vast majority of our business in those hours, but because we were open, people came to rely on us and people came to depend on us. And it was ingrained in their head, you can always rely on Kinko's. They're always there. And so they weren't probably going to come out at 3 or 4 in the morning, but they knew they could if they wanted to. And because they knew they could if they wanted to, they absolutely showed up at 11. And I think in Stillwater, sometimes people have a tendency to think of us a little bit as Mayberry still. And some of our businesses don't always operate as businesses should. You have to be open, and you have to be open regularly.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed that's kind of weird, and I don't know if this is just because of OSU having a lot of weekend events and Stillwater having more weekend events, but I've noticed a lot more businesses being closed on Mondays.
Yeah, I think I think that is true, and I think that helps the business owner. And again, as long as it's predictable, I think if you want to be closed Tuesday and Wednesday, go for it. And at Hatch, I can tell you, almost bar none, our slowest day of the week is going to be Tuesday, almost without exception. Saturday and Sunday, obviously very busy. Monday, still pretty vibrant and busy. Tuesday, it's like everybody decided, oh yeah, we've got work. We got to buckle down and do this thing. And by Thursday, they're ready to do something again. But I think what I mean by being open or being closed is like, you want to be closed on Monday? Do it. And make that your regular thing. You want to be closed Sunday and Monday? Like, I'm fine with that. But what I see some is like, you'll show up to a business and they got a sign hung on the door. It said, hey, we closed today. We'll be back in a couple hours. That can really have an impact that you don't know it's going to have until it's already too late. And people will just take you off of their list if they can't depend on you.
Yeah.
You show up once or you show up twice and you can't get in. Like, people just remove you from the list and they'll go to the place that is dependable, that is always open. And I think sometimes Stillwater is a big, small town. And so people can't decide, are we a small town or are we a big town? And how do you behave? Because you can do those things in a small town. Aunt Leela's going to come back a couple hours later because she didn't have a whole lot going on and no big deal. But in a bigger town, you can't really do that because your competition is greater and the expectations are higher, and you either hit them or you will fail. And so I hope that, again, it just goes back to those details.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about like all of downtown not opening until 10 a.m.? Is that weird to you? I find myself trying to run morning errands.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think that's weird.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. I don't have that luxury. I'm open at 6. Hatch is open at 6, and my office here is open at 8. And so I'm always jealous of those who don't have to come in until 10. But it's hard to turn the Titanic. And so people are kind of used to what people are used to. And so if you've always opened at 10, that's when you open.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as we evolve, you're a little bit like a lobster in a pot. You don't even know that you've evolved. And or you don't even know that the circumstances around you have changed. The water's now boiling and you don't even know it because I've been there the whole time. That's one of the best things about kind of owning Hatch. I have a general manager and I've got a great management team. They do an excellent job. But because I'm not there every day, I see all the things that they don't see. And so I can go in there and be like, hey, this, and this. With those people that aren't opening until 10, they may have run the metrics in their business and say, we do no sales between 7 and 10. And I can tell you what our sales are. But I also know that I have to be open for those 2 hours because it gets back to that Kinko's theory. Like, because we're open at 6 and people know that we're open at 6 and they come to rely on us, even if I'm only ringing 200 through the register, the rest of the day I'm ringing more because of it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept.
It is. Humans are weird. I kind of love the sociology and psychology aspect of it all. Humans want to be where humans are. When I started doing all this down here, one of my main focuses was building residential units. So we bought buildings. We had no idea what we were going to put on the ground floor of them. I only cared about what we could put upstairs. Like, how many apartments can I get up there? How many bedrooms can I get up there? What are we going to be able to rent them for? And who's our demographic that's going to occupy them? Because humans want to be where humans are. If you go into a restaurant and it's empty, you're like, oh, you're automatically suspect and you're automatically uncomfortable and you don't even 100% know why, but you're like, I don't know if we should be here. you go on Yelp, it's got a 5-star review, but it's sitting empty. You're like, I don't know about that, Yeah. And so, it's just, it gets back to psychology and sociology, and we're all a little bit weird, but my job, I think, is to grow the density down here and get more people here so that people want to be here. It's weird. I mean, but that's it.
No, it makes sense. You have to build culture, and then the culture expands.
If I can get more people living down here, then I'll get more people eating down here. And if I get more people eating down here, then I'll get more people that want to entertain down here. And if I get more people who want to entertain, then they're going to want to go into every boutique, and they're going to want to buy something or take it back to their little apartment. And they're going to get up and do it all again tomorrow. And they're going to love this little enclave that we've created. I think Stillwater's lucky that we have a downtown that is as long as it is, even though it hasn't always looked great. A lot of downtowns don't look the way that we look.
Right.
And there are some that are far better. I think Guthrie's done a fantastic job of restoring, but even they have a high vacancy rate. We have a real opportunity to really invest in the heart of our community and keep that heart pumping for another 50 to 100 years. And it'll be somebody else's problem at that point. But we did a pretty good job preserving what we've got. And I think it's fun to see how it evolves. And we've got some great ideas on trying to make sure that as we invest in it and we make it cool, that we're not just doing it for people that can afford it. And so we've looked at some ways to continue to have artists and employees living in the immediate vicinity, because that's important to me. I don't think you should make things only for people that have incomes that can afford them. I think you should make nice things. It's always fun to me because that culture, that richness is the thing that we all want. But whenever you go into development, 9 times out of 10, it's the thing that it's the first to go, because the dollar sign is the first thing that gets chased. And so it's fun to also sit there and go like, okay, what are we going to do to make sure that we are also protecting the people's ability to live down here and people's ability to enjoy being down here without having to grab their wallet, because that's important.
So one last question. I started this podcast so that people who aren't in rooms to have these conversations can still kind of know what's going on and kind of feel like they are involved in the growth of Stillwater. But what's something that people can actively do to support growing our community and building this culture?
I honestly try to buy as much as I can locally. That's just not always doable. There's a lid to the coffee urns at Hatch. Like, I'm never going to find that local, and I know that. So then you turn to your online retailer. But I need a torch for creme brulee or to brulee something in the kitchen. I should go to Murphy's. That means I have to leave my house and I have to drive down there and I have to grab it. Okay, that's part of it. And could I get a derailleur for $20 less online than walking into District Bicycles? Maybe, but Bobby and Crystal have kids too, and they contribute to our nonprofits in town, and they've created an amazing sense of community would otherwise not be here. And so we should absolutely support them. So I think my number one would be like, hey, Amazon's convenient, and the rest of the online retailers, they're super convenient. Please be inconvenienced and go see the people that are supporting your booster club and your scholarship funds and remitting all the sales tax that's getting churned into roads and bridges and everything else in the immediate vicinity. If you can get it here, you should get it here. And if you see people that are going into local retailers and like looking at their prices and looking at them online, give them a quick nudge and be like, hey, they're here for us too. And so I think that's, sure, there's a civic engagement component to it. Go to city council, meet, get involved, take a role in it. Like, yes, not everybody has that kind of time. We are all consumers in some form, fashion, or another. And so I think that my main one would be like, if you can source it local, and local isn't reprehensibly overpriced. That happens sometimes. Trust me, I've heard it. I know. I've seen it. I get it. I don't know why Stillwater seems to be on an island sometimes, but it seems like if you can get it and it's not a price gouging situation, you should, because that dollar that circulates in this community, it is almost invaluable. And for what we get, and there will be a day and time where Amazon's not going to give to this community, and Walmart.com is not going to give to this community. District might, Empire might, Hatch will, the hotel that remains to be named will, and things like that. So if you can get it here, and try hard, and make it a game. Like How much can I reduce my online ordering footprint? And how much can I actually source in Stillwater, Oklahoma? And by the way, if I can't source it, how many people are trying to get the thing that I want to get here? Open up a shop. It's actually not nearly as hard as you think it is. And certainly has as many qualified people like me doing it. That was the great thing about politics. And you always think, oh, I can't do that because, you have to have this special skill set or this special mindset or this whatever. Then you get elected to office and you peel back the curtain and you're like, oh yeah, never mind. There's nothing special about anybody in this room. Like they're just, okay, you won a popularity contest and here we are. So I would encourage people to take the risk. It's not nearly as risky as you think it is. And if you want something, despite what your mom said, you're not that special. You're not that unique. There's probably all these other people out there that also want this thing, and you should explore whether or not you can make that a side hustle in your life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Cory.
Hey, I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to Still Connect. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And if you loved today's episode, don't forget to follow the podcast on social media as well, where I share highlights, updates, and more. Also, be sure to share the podcast with all of your Stillwater friends so that we can grow the podcast and our community. If you believe in building community through these conversations, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, where for a small monthly commitment, you can get early access to episodes, a peek behind the curtain at the podcast making process, and a shout out on an episode. With a higher contribution, you can submit questions for upcoming guests, make special requests for the show, get access to online Q&As, and even be on the podcast for an interview segment. No matter what your capacity for supporting the podcast is, every little bit helps grow this amazing community. And we all need community. So even when life gets busy, make sure you still connect.